Hello everyone, welcome back. Tom with Capo Fetish. Let's talk about some Beatlesque sounding tracks from various artists today. I'm going to start off here with an early example of this is a track released in 1965, a track that sounds like it could have come off the Hard Day's Night soundtrack. It sounds so much like the Beatles. It was a number 12 hit in the US. I don't know where it charted in the UK or elsewhere, but a huge hit here. And it sounds just like the Beatles. And I'm talking about Lies from the Knickerbockers. I don't have the Lies single or the Lies album, but I do have it on this Nuggets one disc compilation called Nuggets from Nuggets, Choice Artifacts in the First Psychedelic Era. This is a really fine, just scaled down version of the entire Nuggets box set. Here's the song list on the back. And Lies by the Knickerbockers comes up at track 3. So check that out. That is really, if you can only afford or only want one Nuggets compilation, this is the one to get. There's not a bad track in the mix here. So today we're starting off here with Lies by the Knickerbockers, released in 1965. It sounds just like a Beatles track from that era. It sounds just like Lennon on lead vocals. I forgot who the lead vocalist is in the Knickerbockers, but that's what we're starting off with here. Lies from the Knickerbockers from 1965. And if you want a Nuggets compilation, this is the one to get here from 2000 from Rhino. Another one here, a track buried deep on this amazing album by XTC. Their album Non-Such from 1992. Why this track was not featured more in the beginning of the sequence is beyond me. I think it's the best track on this album and is buried way deep on this album. This track is called Then She Appeared from XTC's Non-Such album. It sounds like an outtake from the Magical Mystery Tour Sgt. Pepper era. It is absolutely just magical, beautifully constructed, incredible melody, harmonies, very Beatlesque, Andy Partridge and Colin Moulding. I think it is one of my top 5 all-time XTC tracks, just for the fact that it sounds very Beatlesque. And the first time I heard it, I couldn't believe that it was buried so deep on this album for such a stellar track. And here it is right here, way deep in the CD. So if you never heard this track, highly recommend it. Pull it up, XTC's Then She Appeared from Non-Such from 1992. One track that has always fascinated me for decades is this track called Peace of Mind, also known as Candle Burns. Back in the late 60s, when the Beatles formed Apple Records, a lot of artists were trying to get signed to the label. A lot of those demos ended up in trash cans or just in piles. And I have a feeling this particular one ended up in a trash can and it was retrieved. The sound is very warbly, but it is one of the most eerie sounding types of Beatlesque tracks I've ever heard. It sounds like maybe an outtake from Sgt. Pepper era Magical Mystery Tour. It sounds so much like John Lennon and George Harrison, the harmonies, and it's so freaking creepy. It's on this bootleg here I bought years ago, 20x4, and the track again is called Candle Burns, also known as Peace of Mind. Really, really creepy. Another one you should pull up if you've never heard it. It sounds so much like the Beatles. It's crazy. And it would have fit perfectly on one of those, 1967 albums, even as a B-side maybe. But the way it starts off with these just weird, distorted, disembodied vocals, and the melody is really weird. It's just fantastic. I just love this track. Throwing it in the mix today because it really sounds just like the Beatles. Nobody really knows for sure who actually recorded this. If you do or have any indication, please let me know. It's been a mystery for me for decades. There have been people speculating over the years who it is, but no one really knows for sure. It's been disputed for years that this was an actually Beatles track. George Martin never had any recollection of recording this track, nor any of the Beatles. It's not located in any of the Beatles anthologies or texts or anything as being recorded at Abbey Road. But fantastic stuff here. Peace of Mind, also known as Candle Burns by Who Knows Who. Great track. Another one here from the 5th album by Blur, the self-titled album by Blur, is a track. Was a #1 hit in the UK in '97, and I think it is just a critic once said. A critic once said that this track, Beatle Bum, is kind of like the whole White Album condensed into one song, and I can kind of tell what he's talking about. But it is a fantastic track. Beetle Bum, the starting track of Blur's self-titled album from '97, is just an amazing track, especially when it hits that chorus. It really does sound something like off the White Album, like Dear Prudence or maybe Sexy Sadie or something like that. But just another amazing track. And while we're talking about Blur, I'm going to do a Blur album ranking very soon on the channel, very shortly. I've been listening to all the Blur albums in order again, and I've just been on this Blur kick for the past couple of years. I discovered them a couple of years ago, so I'm really excited to do that album ranking, so look for that. So another one here, Beetle Bum from 1997 from Blur, just another fine Beatlesque track. Got to throw in some Cheap Trick. I always thought Surrender from Heaven Tonight sounded just like very Beatlesque, an updated, late 70s Beatlesque type of track. I always preferred the live version on Budokan. I think it has a little more bite, a little more energy. But this version on Heaven Tonight is probably the best example of the Beatlesque quality. That chorus, the verse, melody, very, very, very Beatlesque. So we're going to go with Surrender here by Cheap Trick off Heaven Tonight. Another fine choice. We got to throw in some Ruddles, right? The entire Ruddles album basically is just a parody of Beatles songs. But there's one in particular on this album that I really think sounds just like the Beatles from like '64, and they do a really great job. And that is I Must Be in Love. There's a video of it, and then in black and white, it looks like they're on the Ed Sullivan Show. And it sounds so much like Lennon from '64. I believe Neil Innes is doing the vocal and those harmonies. Of course, there's a lot of others on here, Cheese and Onions, Good Times Roll, on and on and on. But that I Must Be in Love really, really, to me, sounds so much like the Beatles. So I'm throwing this one in the mix, the entire album, with emphasis on I Must Be in Love. The Ruddles, just a fantastic Beatles parody from 1978. Another one here, Badfinger, from the album Straight Up. How about Baby Blue? Really, really, I mean, obviously, they were signed to Apple Records. They were kind of like thought of as the heirs of the Beatles once they broke up. And there were a lot of, they covered Come and Get It, written by Paul McCartney. I like their version better than the demo version of McCartney's. But songs like Baby Blue or No Matter What, even Day After Day, are very, very straight up Beatlesque. And I think these are some of the finest pop songs of the early 70s here by Badfinger. Baby Blue, No Matter What, you name it, very Beatlesque, great stuff. From 1990, a band that really has a strong Beatlesque aesthetic is Jellyfish. This is their first album, Belly Button. And the track on here I'm talking about is That's the Way. That Is Why. That Is Why is an amazing track. So if you've never heard this album, heard that track, pull this up as well. The vocal harmonies are just the spitting image of the Fab Four, the melody, the whole vibe of the track. So That Is Why by Jellyfish from the Belly Button album from 1990, another fave of mine that's Beatlesque. Matthew Sweet's Girlfriend has a couple of Beatlesque tracks I really dig. One being I've Been Waiting, the second track, is really great. Also, it has this kind of chimey birds quality to it, but the harmonies really remind me of like Rubber Soul era. A track maybe like Think for Yourself really shines through this track, I've Been Waiting. If you've never heard this album, this is really one of the most, I think one of the greatest albums of the 1990s. It's just absolute perfection. This is the vinyl version, has 10 songs, but the original CD version had 3 bonus cuts that were really, really outstanding as well. But just a fine singer-songwriter album with hints of Beatles, Big Star, Neil Young, just fantastic stuff, updated for the 1990s generation. And if you've never heard the track I've Been Waiting, you must pull it up. It is just a stellar pop song. And it looks like Matthew Sweet is recovering fairly well from his stroke, so that's good to see. Hope he gets back out on the road. The guy's just such a talented artist. Love the man, love the man's music. I've Been Waiting from Matthew Sweet from the Girlfriend album. Another fine Beatlesque moment. Let's go back to 1967 for the band The Merry-Go-Round. This is their debut album, self-titled. A lot of great tracks on here. In fact, Emmett Road sounds very, very English on this album, very British, even though they're from LA. One of the biggest tracks on here was Live, which the Bangles covered. But the track on here that really shows the Beatlesque qualities is Time Will Show the Wiser. Another one you should check out if you've never heard it. Richard Thompson also did a version of Time Will Show the Wiser on his guitar vocal album in the early 70s. That's a really cool version as well. But going with the merry-go-round, Time Will Show the Wiser, the second track on their debut album. Fine stuff. Got to throw in some Big Star here. Their classic song, September Girls, off the album Radio City, is another fine Beatlesque example, especially in the midsection with those harmonies and just the whole verse melody. Just fantastic stuff. Sung by Alex Chilton, formerly of the Box Tops. So Big Star's September Girls, another fave of mine that's very Beatlesque. And then another one that pretty much takes the guitar line of She Loves You and puts it into a new context is the Jam song It's Too Bad, off their album All Mod Cons from 1978. This whole album has a lot of various Beatlesque kind of moments. I think that one is a shining example. It's Too Bad of All Mod Cons, the second track on side 2. So, we could go down a rabbit hole with this subject. Please offer up as many as you want. Beatlesque tracks from various artists over the years. I'd like to know which ones you'd put into the comments section. And as always, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. If you dig the content across the channel, press subscribe, and we'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.